On Law Weekly today, we discuss issues surrounding the guidelines recently released by the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, NFIU, which has been slated to become operational on June 1st, 2019. We also look at the guidelines released by the National Assembly for accreditation of media organizations covering the Senate. Our guest is Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Falana. Ahead of the May 29 handover, some senior lawyers share with Law Weekly what issues they think the president should focus on, plus our weekly recap of the top trending stories from the courtrooms. Hello and welcome to the program. I am Shola Shuyeli. The Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, NFIU enforcement and guidelines to reduce crime vulnerabilities created by cash withdrawals from local government funds throughout Nigeria has set June 1st, 2019 as the takeoff date for the new order, which makes it compulsory for all LGA allocations to go straight to their respective bank accounts. The governors of the 36 states, acting under the aegis of the Nigerian Governors Forum, have rejected the move. They accuse the NFIU of dabbling into a matter beyond its mandate and have asked President Muhammadu Buhari to intervene. To deepen the discussions on the issue, I spoke to Mr. Femi Falana, SAN, to get his views on the controversy it's generating. Let's start with your thoughts on the guidelines issued by the NFIU.
The NFIU, or the guidelines, are anchored on the provisions of the newly enacted NFIU Act. Unfortunately, the governors that have criticized the guidelines have not bothered, with profound respect, to read the guidelines. And mind you, the legislators that enacted the law are representing all the constituencies in the country. 2, Nigeria is a member of the international community. We are represented in the Edmond Group, which has designed 40 rules, regulations for stopping money laundering or for regulating movement of funds all over the world. Nigeria was suspended because the NFIU was not made autonomous, because it was warehoused in the office of the EFCC. The Edmond Group insisted that this body should be autonomous. There were other issues raised, and the National Assembly sat down with the executive to have the NFIU Act. The bill was sent to the bill was passed by both houses of the National Assembly, unanimously passed, before it was transmitted to the president for his assent. And without wasting any time, it was not one of those laws that the president raised any objections, or any, he had no problem with the law, and he assented to it. So if an agency of the government, empowered by law to regulate finances in the country, now comes up with some policies to say, we want to ensure that funds are not moved towards the funding of terrorism, nobody can quarrel with that, because all of us have a duty to keep terrorism at bay. I have studied the Constitution. I've studied the guidelines vis-a-vis the Constitution with profound respect. I haven't seen any conflict.
But what do you make of the response of the governors that it amounts to an usurpation of their powers?
I would like to advise the governors to have a critical look at the relevant provisions of the Constitution. There's no doubt that Section 162 of the Constitution provides that there has to be a joint state-local government account. What the guidelines are saying essentially is that local governments in the country cannot withdraw more than 500,000 naira at a go, a day. I can't see any problem with that. I can't see a problem.
Some legal practitioners say that for the NFIU to do what it seeks to achieve, that there is a need for an amendment of the Constitution to allow for the funds to be paid directly to the local governments, that we should do away with the issue of joint accounts. What do you think?
So when the central bank says I cannot withdraw more than 500,000 naira cash from my money, do we need an amendment of the Constitution? Yet Section 37 of the Constitution provides that I have the right to privacy of my correspondences and so on and so forth. I have a right to my property, and my funds in the bank are part of my property. But I can't go to court and say the central bank has limited the amount of money that I can withdraw at a time or per day. I can't go to court. Why will, no, it's not, I'm saying it's not unconstitutional. Having regards to the need to regulate the movement of money in the country, in any country. Oh, yes. So there's nothing illegal about it. There's nothing unconstitutional. And particularly for a government that claims to be fighting corruption, the APC-led government has proclaimed that it is fighting corruption. Therefore, the majority of state governments that belong to the APC have a duty to show Nigerians that we are committed to transparency and accountability, which the guidelines are all about. So I can't see any contradiction between what the NFIU is doing and what the APC government claims to be fighting, which is corruption.
But in case of a breach, does the NFIU have the powers to prosecute?
In terms of prosecution, of course, has the powers to prosecute. Yeah. Again, I think the governors may be relying on the case of Attorney General of Abia State and Attorney General of the Federation, when in 2005, the federal or the National Assembly enacted a law to allow the federal government to monitor the funds of the local government, following allegations that the funds were being diverted by state governments. Of course, the state governments won the case at that time. But the law now has taken care of the lacuna, which the Supreme Court identified in that case. So, but the law develops regularly. I do hope the governors will pluck up the courage to challenge the NFIU guidelines.
Okay, so let's move on now from that issue to another guidelines, the one issued by the management of the National Assembly for accreditation of media organizations, journalists, and correspondents covering the Senate, effective from June 2019. What do you make of that one?
There's no doubt that the National Assembly deserves sympathy on a consistent basis. The Ninth Assembly has tried all it could to whittle down the freedom of the press in our country. There have been moves to gag the media through a law that didn't see the light of day. There was an attempt to amend the Nigerian Press Act to completely take away press freedom. There was also an attempt to make it impossible for the social media to criticize public officers in the country. Again, it failed. There have been other subtle attempts to gag the press. The latest one, of course, these guidelines were very provocative, very insulting. Very insulting. In fact, it virtually turned the media into an extension of the office, the media department of the National Assembly. Again, while I say that the National Assembly deserves the sympathy of Nigeria, is the fact that more than the other arms of government, the National Assembly has been on the receiving end because of the type of laws that have oozed out of both houses of the National Assembly because of the fact that they live above the average Nigerians, because of the fact that they pay themselves, they award to themselves jumbo emoluments, contrary to the provisions of Section 70 of the Constitution, which has authorized the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission to fix the salaries and allowances of legislators. The National Assembly has not been able to use its legislative powers to address the security, poverty, and the frustration of our youths. So you have a National Assembly that is worried, morbidly worried, that Nigerians are so critical of its relevance, because there are people who are campaigning for the merger of the two houses. So I think this is what the National Assembly is responding to. How do we guard the press? That is what those guidelines are all about. But happily,
the leadership has
denied, based on the nationwide attack, criticism of the guidelines, the leadership, led by Dr. Bukola Saraki, has withdrawn the guidelines. In fact, has denied knowledge of the guidelines. And I want to believe that.
With all of these attempts that you have mentioned on the media, how do you think that the media should be responding?
We need to assemble all the press laws in the country and take out, remove from them, criminal provisions that make it impossible for the media to function effectively.
Such as?
Criminal libel. Which for me has been indirectly annulled by the Court of Appeal in 1983, when the provisions of the Penal Code and Criminal Code relating to sedition or seditious publications were declared illegal and unconstitutional. And the Court of Appeal made the point abundantly clear in that judgment. I'm talking of the case of Othon Nwankwo and the state, that what should be done if any public officer feels offended by any publication or any statement made by the media, you have to go to court and sue for libel or slander, where you put your reputation in issue, and that no public officer should be permitted to use the machinery of the state to harass or intimidate his opponent. So for me, I think that judgment has taken care of a number of the anti-media laws that are still in our statute books. So for me, I think the media will have to rise to the occasion. As soon as the 9th or 10th Assembly, National Assembly is inaugurated, the media should move speedily to ask for the decriminalization of media laws in our country.
So how does the media do it? Does it file a suit or what?
Yes, what was done in Ghana, and incidentally, I was involved in the process in Ghana. The media in Ghana was very happy to come across the case of Ontonwankwo and the state. And that was used in making a case for decriminalization of media laws in Ghana. In fact, the impression was given, oh, that Nigeria has gone beyond us. So let us try and join, the civilized countries in Africa, not knowing that we are still battling with a number of, very backward and primitive flaws, with regards to press freedom in our country. So I think we have to embark on campaign as well as challenge the constitutional validity of some of the other provisions, like the provisions on criminal libel. Yeah.